Some of you have been asking me for a series of tutorials for absolute beginners. The first thing you need to understand is how light affects the appearance of form. When you add light and shadow to your drawing, you can make it come to life by creating the illusion of form and depth. You can make a flat line drawing look like a real three-dimensional object. It is because of light and the characteristics of light in the scene. We're looking at light and how it illuminates the objects in our environment. Light is the reason we see anything, and the characteristics to the light can completely change the appearance of the objects it illuminates. So let's understand how the light behaves. For learning it the best way, we can start with simple shapes. I'm going to example a sphere to explain about the different elements of light, because this is a lot easier to understand than a complex form. The first thing that is important to learn about light is the direction of the light. Here the light source is coming down from the top left. In this example, the light rays are completely parallel to each other. This type of light source in nature can actually be considered the sun. We actually have two main zones, the light side, which is facing the light source, and the shadow side, which is the part light can't reach. When light shines on an object, there is something called a terminator, the edge where the form transitions from light to shadow. It's located at the tangents between the light source and the form. In other words, just before the plane starts to face away from the light. From that point on, the light does not penetrate the object. In fact, the border between these two areas is where the light becomes completely parallel to the edges and is the beginning of the terminator. The edges can appear soft on matte surfaces like wooden object or fur, fabric, stone, or hard on shine surfaces such as a plastic bowl, glass, or metal. But these are for the pattern and texture lessons, which need more explanation, and we'll fully discuss about it later in another tutorial. Okay, let's start by talking about the shadow side. After the terminator is the beginning of the shadow shape. Shadow shape generally includes two different parts, which are two types of shadows, form shadow and cast shadow. Form shadow is a shadow caused by the plane turning away from the light source. We usually see the form shadow on the object itself. A cast shadow appears when a form blocks the light from hitting another form. In this case, this sphere is blocking the light from reaching this part of the table. You can find this shape by projecting the line from the light source to the terminator of the first form, which is the sphere, and continuing those lines to reach the second form, which is the ground or the table. The cast shadow can tell you where the light source is coming from. All you have to do is chase the edges against your object. So let's see how the cast shadow is formed. What we have to do is to draw an imaginary line from the middle of the terminator in the same direction of the light until it hits the table. We considered a hypothetical ground for the sphere, and we repeat these lines in the same direction and path in different parts of the terminator. And the only thing we have to do is to simply connect these lines to each other to shape a curve. Along the terminator, sometimes you will see a core shadow. It's a darker plane that defines the edge of the shadow and looks like a dark strip running along the boundary between the two sides. The thickness and softness of the core shadow can vary quite a bit. It depends on the thickness of the form, how sharp the edge is between the planes of light and dark, or the angle and position of the reflecting light source. Sometimes you won't see the core shadow at all. Shadows are rarely completely black. Light bounces off objects in environments and is reflected back into the shadows. This is called reflected light or bouncing light. In this case, the light will bounce off the ground and into the shadow on the sphere, causing the object to not be completely in the shadow. Or in other words, light bounces off the table and illuminates the shadow side of the sphere. So we have direct light and reflected light. So it happens only if there's something on the shadow side to reflect back enough light to create a visible difference in values. There are so many things in the environment that light can reflect off of. Walls, nearby objects, tables, or any surface the object is sitting on. Black surfaces absorb more light. So in this example, the core shadow is no longer visible. But white is highly reflective. So as the ground gets lighter, it reflects more light. The same rule is for nearby objects. Lighter objects reflect more light and darker objects reflect less. So as I mentioned, light can reflect off of many things in the environment. Reflected light doesn't just affect form shadows, it also affects cast shadows. Less light can bounce into this deep crevice where the sphere and table meet. In fact, this area is a tighter spot where the ball touches the table. And so that area gets darker as it goes deeper. This is called an occlusion shadow. Let's move on to light side of the sphere. Immediately after the terminator is the halftone or midtone. Midtones are the darkest values on this side of the sphere. These are the planes of the form that are partially hit by the direct light, where the edges start curving away from the light source. These areas receive less and less light the more they angle away. As the planes get closer and closer to facing the light, they will get lighter. And between these two ranges, there are different values of light. There's a point which is called the center light or core light, which is the area facing the light directly. A very simple rule that you need to pay attention to is the angle of the light and the angle of your object in relation to the light. In this example, this is the point that is specified here. Don't confuse the center light with highlight. The difference between the two is that the center light is the plane facing the light source, whereas the highlight is a reflection of the light source. This is the brightest point on an object. The reflection will move depending on where the viewer is, so the highlight can change position depending on where you're standing. The explanation I gave you in these few minutes are the most important informations you should know about light. So start with simple shapes and then try on more complex shapes. And there's actually no strange rule. So far, we said that we determine the direction of the light first, and then the place where the light will be completely parallel, and then we specify the terminator. And after that, the form shadow, and then bouncing lights, and then we specify the cast shadow on the ground. With this simple method, we can draw the shadows of an object and apply the same rules to more complex shapes. My name is Peony, and I thank you for watching this tutorial. Bye till the next one.